So we left the farm at the end of Rob's first term at the local primary school, and we found a 2-bedroom flat in Elwood, and it was right opposite the Elwood Primary School, so very convenient for someone to accompany Rob just across the road. Mac tried selling New World encyclopedias, which was agony for him, and it was agony for me to watch him too, because he had to psych himself up to knock on the door of strangers and give them the spiel. In any case, we also got a little nursery school for Philip, run by a middle-aged Scottish woman, and just a handful of children that she was looking after, which was very satisfactory. And I looked up in a local suburban newspaper and saw this advertisement for an Australian history teacher, HSC level, and just a telephone number. I didn't know what school it was, or it had no other information, so I rang the number, and Sister Josepha here was the answer I got. So then I knew it was a Catholic school, and I went to see her. And we had a very pleasant conversation in her little office. And I said to her, Sister, I want to be absolutely frank. I have not taught Australian history since I left Australia, which is 8 years ago. And as I understand it, a lot of research and a lot of writing has been, academic writing, has been done since then. I would be very pleased to have your backup, because I was in fact taking her place. She had just been promoted to the principal of Star of the Sea, and she was looking for her replacement. So I said I would appreciate it if I could sit in on a week or so of your lessons with the class, so I get a sense of how you're going about it, and also I will catch up in the meantime on my reading. She said, yes, that's all right, Elaine. We'll be glad to have you, and I can help you along the way as well, anytime you want to ask me. So she was a splendid teacher, a very good example, and she was in fact a descendant of the man who discovered gold in Ballarat. So that she had a particular personal story to give to the class, and I was starting at the gold rushes. It worked well. Oh, another question she said to me, I said to her, first of all, Sister, you do realise I'm not a Catholic. And she said, but are you a Christian? And I said, I was brought up a Christian, a Presbyterian Christian, although I'm not a practicing Christian now. She said, that's all right, your values are in the right place. And so, yeah, and it was, of course, a part-time job, and a part-time job doesn't pay for holidays, and it doesn't pay sickness pay, and it was before there was any talk of superannuation. So this was 1968. It was still at that time, married women could not get a job in a fully paid job in no equal pay, that's right, in public service. So I wasn't too fussed about being engaged by a Catholic school. It also amused me a bit because my family were incredibly anti-Catholic, despite the that, as I think I've told you before, the Stratham Primary School nursery teacher was herself a Catholic, a local girl from a local Catholic family, well known to everyone. And she actually boarded with my family, my mother and father, partly to help my mother and father with 2 young children as well. I think she got rent-free for giving that help. And then she pedalled off on a bicycle to the primary school in term time every weekday. The teaching at Star of the Sea was very collegiate. It was a very friendly staff room. And in the staff room, I discovered there was also a German Lutheran, a Lutheran teaching German, and a Jew teaching French. So obviously they weren't too fussed about being a Catholic and teaching there. And it was a very liberal, it was, Vatican II had not long been beforehand, where a lot of reform of attitudes and practices in the Catholic Church had been made. And they had been adopted by this order of presentation nuns, particularly the section of the order that ran Star of the Sea. Another section of the order ran Windsor College in Melbourne, which was much more conservative. So I found this all quite enjoyable, and I didn't have to teach religious studies, for example, so that was a relief. And the following year, I was taken on full-time. And in that following year, the nun, Sister Christine, who had been the coordinator of history at Star of the Sea, that position was given to me. So I thought, oh well, I'm doing all right. But during that year, later in the year, I got a big shock with Rob. He came home one day after school and he had a kick on the shin, and a huge bruise between his shin and his ankle developed. And I thought, this is terrible. Then I discovered he had another big bruise around his hip area, and apparently he got that because he bumped into the fin of a car that was parked in the street. So the next morning, I said to Mac, you've got to take him to the doctor. This is too serious. I went to school and I got a phone call from Mac late in the morning. He'd taken Rob to the local GP, which we got to know, and he had immediately referred him to the Royal Hospital, very big private public hospital in Melbourne, which specialised in blood. He'd immediately taken him there. He had a blood test, and then he said, well, this prognosis is serious. I think you better come and we'll talk to the specialist at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. And I went to Sister Josepha and I said, this is what's happened. I would like to leave and go straight to the hospital now. And she said, of course, Elaine, you must. Your family comes first, Elaine. And don't worry about anything here. You take whatever time you need and I will look after everything. Bless you. I thought. The doctor, the specialist said, and I had to look it up again today to remember it, what it was, thrombocytopenia purpura, which was in fact a disease where the spleen was destroying the platelets in the blood that causes clotting faster. They were being destroyed faster than they were being remade in the bone marrow. And the doctor says to us, this is very serious. If he has any accident that breaks the skin, he could bleed to death. And so we'll admit him to Prince Henry's Hospital, which no longer exists in Melbourne, and we'll put him on steroids. And I said, is there any other treatment that you can give? I was a bit shocked that it should be steroids. And he said, well, I can take out his spleen. I said, well, that's drastic, isn't it? And he said, trust me, Mrs. McKay. And I thought, you can't ask a stranger to trust you. You've got to earn trust. And I'm thinking this, and I come to the conclusion I don't have a choice. And so I turned to Mac and I said, well, if that's what it's got to be, that's what it's got to be. So we took him to Prince Henry's Hospital, and I had taken a couple of days off. I went to see him the next day in hospital. He didn't feel sick, which was a bit of a problem. I find him in a children's ward with 3 other kids in beds, all pretty bright and cheerful, and so was Rob. But what they were doing to entertain themselves, they were throwing to each other soft toys. And I thought, my God, suppose it falls on the floor, Rob leaps out of this hospital bed, which is high, and leans over and falls out onto his head. Oh dear. I couldn't believe that the nursing staff, couldn't see this as a possibility. So we had some talk there. He was discharged after a couple of weeks, I think, and that led into the second term school holidays. And we had arranged to go to to Depot Beach to meet Rosemary Brissenden there and have a holiday. We also went to Mollymook where Janet Penny and David and their children were staying too. So by the time we got there, Rob had started to bloat up in a dramatic fashion, and I thought, this doesn't look good. So I rang the doctor in Melbourne, and by this time it was about 4 weeks since he had seen him, and I said, this looks terrible. He said, it's the steroids. You can cut back now on the steroids to 1 tablet a day or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And his swelling, his bloating went down, and it took a while to come back to something normal. Perhaps back to Star of the Sea.